You're being watched by a federal drone, ma'am. Smile for the FAA, I said calmly as Gladys shrieked into her phone. Standing dead center in a flower bed, she just trampled to confront me. Her eyes bulged. She didn't know the drone above her was live streaming everything, including her wild meltdown, to 3 different cloud backups in my YouTube channel's homepage. The morning had started out quiet, the kind of crisp, blue ski weekend that makes you want to grab a lawn chair and just sit under a tree with a lemonade. Instead, I packed up my drone case, laced my boots, and made my way to Ridgeview Park, one of the few public spaces with wide-open clearings and barely any RF interference. I wasn't just filming for fun. My FAA-certified drone work had recently been picked up by a small nature documentary channel. This shoot was for a segment on migrating birds nesting along the creek bed. I'd even gotten advance permission from the local parks department. Everything was buttoned up and legal. As I set up my ground station on a picnic table and started the pre-flight calibration, a golden retriever jogged past with its tongue hanging out, followed by a kid holding a bubble wand. Peaceful. The drone lifted smoothly into the sky, rising over the tree line. The moment I saw the angle, sunlight glinting off the water, the herons lifting off in perfect sync, I knew I had something special. I adjusted the gimbal, got the perfect arc, and, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" That voice could splinter glass. I turned, and there she was, mid-50s, stiff pastel cardigan, short blonde bob that hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. Gladys. I'd seen her before, always scolding kids who rode their bikes too fast or calling security when someone used charcoal at the picnic grills. Now, she had her phone in one hand, pointed straight at me, and the other hand was already dialing 911. "You can't fly that thing here," she screeched, advancing like a weather-worn tank. "It's dangerous. There are children around. This is illegal." I took a breath and tried the polite route first. "Ma'am, this is a public park. I'm FAA certified, and I have authorization to fly here. Would you like to see the documentation?" "I don't care about your fake license," she yelled, drawing the attention of half the park. A jogger slowed down. A couple walking their dog turned and stared. "You're spying on children. I'm calling the police right now." She stomped toward me, practically foaming at the mouth, and stepped over my ground station equipment, knocking over my backup monitor. I bent to pick it up while the drone held steady at 150 feet above. She yelled into the phone, louder than necessary, "Yes, 911. There's a suspicious man operating a drone near children. Yes, he's recording everyone." And then came the kicker. She turned to the crowd and shouted, "Everyone, you're being filmed without consent." I calmly stood up and, without breaking eye contact, flipped a switch on the controller. The drone zoomed in perfectly on her face, now contorted in rage, and displayed it on the fold-out monitor she had just knocked over. "Actually," I said, "you're the only one being filmed now, and your public tantrum is going out live. You'll be famous." Her mouth dropped open, but she was too far gone. "You're going to jail," she spat, "and I'll make sure your little drone is confiscated." 10 minutes later, the police arrived. To cruisers, lights on. The officers stepped out cautiously, one hand near his holster. Gladys rushed to meet them like she was reporting a kidnapping. "That man over there is recording people illegally. He refused to stop. He even threatened me with a drone." The officer nodded seriously and turned to me. "Sir, can I speak with you a moment?" "Of course," I said, opening my FAA folder. Inside was my remote pilot certificate, flight log, airspace maps, and signed permission from the parks department. I handed them over while pointing to the signage I'd clearly displayed on the table. FAA-certified flight in progress. Area monitored. The officer read in silence. Then he looked at Gladys. "Ma'am, everything checks out. He's fully authorized." Gladys blinked. But he's filming. What about my rights?" "You're in a public park," the officer said flatly, "and he's operating under FAA clearance. You're the one interfering with legal activity." She stammered, searching for an angle, but the officer raised a hand. "Also, making false statements on a 911 call is a serious offense. You said he was threatening people. Do you have any proof of that?" Her face drained. He pointed the camera at me. "That's not a threat," he replied. I couldn't help myself. I tapped the drone controls and played back a clip for them on the monitor. Gladys screeching about children and legality while towering over my equipment. The officer chuckled under his breath. Gladys realized the shift. The crowd that had gathered wasn't murmuring in agreement anymore. They were laughing. A kid even shouted, "She's going to be on YouTube." Gladys whirled and pointed a trembling finger at me. "This isn't over. I'm reporting you to the HOA. The HOA doesn't run this park," I said calmly as I lowered the drone into landing position. "But thank you for the free content. This one's definitely going viral." As the officers escorted her to the side for a formal warning, I packed up my gear, checked the footage, and uploaded a preview. Within an hour, the clip had over 20,000 views and climbing. The thumbnail, Gladys' face, mouth mid-yell, with the words "Drone Gladys Goes Nuclear" overlaid in bold. It was only the beginning. I had no idea how far she'd go next, or how satisfying it would be to turn every one of her attacks into another viral hit. But one thing was certain, Gladys picked the wrong pilot to mess with, and I had altitude law and the internet on my side. The video blew up faster than I could have imagined. By the time I got home that evening, it had crossed 50,000 views, and my inbox was overflowing with messages, some laughing, some angry, and a surprising number offering to buy the raw footage. One guy even asked if he could use it in a segment for a drone advocacy podcast. My subscriber count doubled overnight. I should have been celebrating, but I knew better. Gladys didn't strike me as the type to take public humiliation lightly. If anything, I figured I'd just poked the bear, and she was about to come back with teeth. Sure enough, it started the next morning. I woke up to a ping from my email with the subject line, "Urgent HOA action." Unauthorized drone activity. That alone made me laugh. I didn't even live in her subdivision. My house was 2 streets down, outside the HOA boundary. But attached was a long, ridiculous PDF letter accusing me of disrupting the peace, jeopardizing children's safety, and engaging in unlawful surveillance of Ridgeview residents. It was signed not only by Gladys, who apparently held the title of Neighborhood Safety Chair, but also by 2 other names I didn't recognize. One was the president of their HOA board. The other was her husband, conveniently listed as HOA legal liaison, which I strongly suspected was a title she made up in Microsoft Word that morning. Instead of replying, I forwarded the letter to my aviation attorney, Mr. Cole. He'd helped me navigate FAA paperwork before and was the kind of guy who could quote federal drone laws in his sleep. I expected a basic response, maybe a quick cease and desist on their part. What I got back was a 10-paragraph masterpiece, complete with citations from federal preemption laws, FAA Part 107 rules, and even a court case where someone tried to ban drone flights over their property, and lost spectacularly. Mr. Cole's email ended with a line that read, "Should they persist, we may consider a counteraction for harassment and obstruction of lawful federal operations." I smiled. That would shut them up, except it didn't. Gladys went nuclear. Later that day, I got a text from a friend who lived in her neighborhood. He sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post from the whole community page. It was a blurry, zoomed-in photo of me at the park, taken from a weird angle behind a bush, with a caption that read, "Beware, this man flies drones to spy on Ridgeview children. He refused to stop even when confronted by police. Parents, protect your kids." The comments ranged from unhinged to hilarious. One user wrote, "This man is the reason I don't let my kids outside anymore." Another added, "We need new laws. Who lets drones fly over children?" But then others chimed in, calling out Gladys' lies. One guy named Terry posted, he had an FAA badge and a vest. "You can literally see it in your own photo, Gladys." Another user posted a link to the full police body cam footage that had been released after the call, which showed Gladys yelling nonsense while the officer nodded at my paperwork. My favorite comment of all was from an older lady who wrote, "Maybe if Gladys spent less time yelling and more time researching, she'd know drones aren't magic surveillance birds." Gladys responded to all of it with fury. She doubled down in the thread, saying she was petitioning the HOA to ban all drones from airspace above Ridgeview, and that legal action against the operator was in progress. Again, I laughed. Then I noticed something strange. The location she was referencing in the post wasn't just the park. It was a specific part of the park near the community playground, which happened to sit on a sliver of land technically managed by the HOA, but only on the ground. The airspace, like all navigable airspace in the U.S., still belonged to the FAA. She thought because she had jurisdiction over the grass, she could control the sky. Classic Gladys logic. A few days passed, and things seemed to quiet down. I got back to filming, mostly avoiding the park for now, just to keep the temperature down. But then, one afternoon while checking footage from a different project, I noticed something odd. My drone's return to home path had been slightly redirected mid-flight. At first, I thought it was a software glitch, but then I spotted it, a burst of sudden interference in the radio logs, strong enough to trigger an auto-reroute. Someone had been jamming the signal. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but then it happened again. I launched my drone for a sunrise shoot, and 30 seconds and boom. Same interference, same redirection. I checked the location and nearly choked. It was coming from a backyard on the edge of Ridgeview Gladys' address. Now it was war. I called Mr. Cole and asked if what she was doing could be considered illegal. His response was swift. If she's using a jamming device or signal blocker, that's a federal offense. The FCC doesn't play games with that stuff. Get proof, then call me. So I got to work. I set up a secondary drone with diagnostic software and flew it in the same area. Sure enough, as soon as I neared Ridgeview's edge, my controller picked up sudden, unnatural signal degradation. The source, 1 yard in particular. I flew lower, at the far end of her property, partially obscured behind a poorly placed lattice fence. I saw a weird antenna array pointed straight at the sky. It wasn't a Wi-Fi booster. It looked like something off a military surplus site. I couldn't believe it. Gladys was illegally jamming drone signals right next to her vinyl garden gnomes. Rather than confront her directly, I did what any smart man with FAA friends and an internet following would do. I documented it. I stitched together the radio logs, the GPS maps, and even slow-motion thermal footage of the jamming signal patterns. I made sure everything was time-stamped and airtight. And then I called in the big guns. Mr. Cole contacted the FCC, and within 48 hours, they were on it like bloodhounds. Gladys had no idea that her little war on drones was about to cost her far more. Then a few angry Facebook comments. This wasn't just a neighborly feud anymore. It was a federal case, and I had a front row seat. The FCC didn't come with sirens, but their presence was louder than any flashing lights. Two plain-looking sedans rolled up to Ridgeview in the middle of a sunny Wednesday morning. No uniforms, just dark suits, sharp eyes, and clipboards that probably held the weight of federal authority. I watched from my parked truck to blocks away, pretending to fiddle with my coffee as one of them walked up to Gladys' house and knocked. She opened the door, wearing a robe, visibly startled. Her mouth still twisted in whatever rant she'd probably been rehearsing for the next HOA newsletter. But she froze the second the agents introduced themselves. I couldn't hear the words, but her posture changed. She tried to close the door slightly, but the agent put his foot in. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. Then they walked around the side of the house. Gladys followed, flustered and pointing. One of the agents snapped photos. The other pulled out a handheld device and waved it near the weird antenna I'd seen. That's when I knew they'd found what they came for. Gladys didn't get arrested, not then, anyway. But whatever they told her left her pale and twitching. Within a day, her antenna was gone, her Facebook account was locked, and her HOA updates went dark. I assumed that would be the end of it. A normal person would have gotten the message. But Gladys, no. Gladys had one more card to play, and this one was more desperate than anything she'd tried before. It started with a dog. One evening, I was flying my drone over the creek for a wildlife tracking study when I noticed something weird. In the footage, a fenced-off backyard with 6 kennels arranged neatly in rows. From 100 feet up, you wouldn't think much of it, But then the drone's mic picked up barking. Dozens of dogs, not 6. I tilted the camera, zooming under a tarp, more cages. Some were makeshift, others stacked. I tilted again and caught sight of Gladys stepping out the back door in rubber gloves, dragging a hose behind her. That wasn't a normal home setup. That was a business. I'd stumbled across an illegal dog boarding operation, and, judging from the number of dogs and the conditions, it wasn't just unlicensed. It looked dangerously overcrowded. At first, I considered doing nothing. I wasn't a vigilante. But then the memory of her false 911 call, the signal jamming, the character assassination attempts all came flooding back. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was accountability. So I clipped the footage, grabbed screenshots, and drafted an anonymous report to the County Animal Control Office. I uploaded everything, timestamped and GPS tagged, and added a polite note about the possible zoning violations and noise complaints that other neighbors might have been too scared to report. It didn't take long. That weekend, a white van marked Animal Services rolled into Ridgeview. 2 officers in khaki uniforms knocked on Gladys' door, and once again, I watched from a discreet distance. She tried to stall them at the front porch, smiling, gesturing inside like everything was normal. But they weren't fooled. One officer calmly stepped past her, the other walking toward the side gate. And when the barking erupted again, tenfold louder than usual, it was over. They spent nearly an hour inspecting the property. When they left, they carried a stack of citations into small dogs that looked like they hadn't seen daylight in weeks. That should have been enough, but karma wasn't done with Gladys. Apparently, the inspection triggered a deeper investigation, and zoning authorities followed. It turned out Gladys hadn't just been running an unlicensed boarding operation. She'd also been collecting money through a fake nonprofit dog rescue. She listed under a different name. When they traced the address to her house, everything started to unravel. In the meantime, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Word had spread fast. Several board members were furious that Gladys had used her position to harass someone outside the neighborhood and drag the association into a federal mess. A few demanded her removal. Others tiptoed around the issue. Gladys showed up to the meeting, trembling and yelling that it was all a setup, a conspiracy led by that drone creep and jealous neighbors. But one of the board members had printed out the screenshots from her Facebook posts, the ones where she called me a predator and promised to take down his kind. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was defamation. Things hit a boiling point when Terry, the quiet guy who always kept to himself and ran the neighborhood watch group, stood up. He revealed that he'd been filming HOA meetings for transparency, and then he pulled out a flash drive and handed it to the board president. On it was a recording from 2 months ago, Gladys admitting she'd bent the rules to find someone who didn't mow their lawn fast enough. Then another clip, this one where she confessed to deleting an email vote and resubmitting it under another board. Members named to pass a petty drone ordinance that never got approved. It was the kind of moment that made the room fall silent. Gladys stood frozen, mouth agape, color draining from her face as the board president looked up and said, "You altered official HOA documents." Gladys stammered, "It was just formatting. I was just trying to speed up the process." The board didn't buy it. They voted right then and there to suspend her indefinitely from all board activities, pending a formal review. She tried to protest, but no one was listening anymore. She stormed out of the meeting, red-faced and shaking, to the sound of scattered applause. Back at home, I checked my YouTube channel. My latest video, the drone footage of the wildlife creek, was performing well. But the real surprise was the older clip, Gladys 911 Meltdown. It had crossed 1 million views. Comments flooded in from around the country, sharing their own Gladys encounters and praising the calm way I'd handled it. People were tagging FAA officials, journalists, even comedians who might roast it on their next late-night segment. It was surreal. What started as a simple weekend drone shoot had turned into a viral saga, one where the villain wrote her own downfall in every paranoid act she took. And the best part was, I hadn't even uploaded the compilation yet, the one that would tie all of it together, that I thought deserved its own release of finale. A flight path to justice. But I wasn't rushing it. I had one more chapter to film. And Gladys, well, she still had a few surprises left, even if she didn't know it yet. The weather was perfect the following Saturday. The kind of day that practically demanded celebration. I decided it was the right moment to roll out the event I'd been planning in the background. While Gladys scrambled to hold her reputation together, flyers had been circulating online and in nearby neighborhoods all week. Free drone workshop. FAA-certified pilot. Learn to fly. What had started as a way to teach some curious kids and maybe boost my channel's image a little, had transformed into a community-wide gathering. Thanks in no small part to the wildfire of Gladys 911 meltdown video. Parents brought their children. Retirees showed up with folding chairs. And a few local videographers I met online even stopped by with their own drones to help run things. The park hadn't seen that much life in years. By 10 o'clock in the morning, we had more than 60 people in attendance. I stood by my fold-out station with two other hobbyist pilots, showing families how to safely operate drones, explaining FAA regulations, and running demo flights over the open field. It was pure energy. Smiling kids pointing at the drones like they were UFOs, grandparents asking about camera specs, even a group of teens filming TikToks using the overhead shots. What I didn't expect, though I should have, was the sound of shrieking brakes around 11:15. Gladys' SUV screeched into the gravel lot like it had been summoned by joy. Her face, already pink, was practically glowing with fury. She stepped out, hands on hips, wearing a sun hat and holding a clipboard like she thought she was some kind of official. "This is an illegal event," she bellowed. "None of you are authorized to be operating flying devices in public space. These are child safety violations." The entire crowd stopped. Heads turned. Kids lowered their toy drones. Even the retirees stopped mid-lawn chair adjustment. I stepped forward calmly, drone controller still clipped to my belt, FAA vest clearly visible, and pointed toward the large banner we'd strung between two trees. It read, FAA Approved Flight Zone. Official drone workshop sponsored by Ridge County Parks. Gladys' eyes locked on it. For the briefest moment, a twitch ran through her face like she knew she'd misstepped but couldn't stop herself anymore. "You can't trick everyone with your signs," she snapped. I spoke to the HOA, and we do not approve of this kind of air traffic over Ridge View. A woman near the back of the crowd raised her hand and said, "Gladys, this park doesn't belong to Ridge View. You tried that argument before. It failed. Remember?" Gladys looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. She tried to shift the energy by shouting, "There are children being filmed without consent. This is a violation of privacy." Another voice chimed in, one of the parents I'd met earlier. "We signed consent forms when we arrived, and the drones aren't even flying over the play area. Maybe go check your facts next time, Gladys." Gladys sputtered. She reached for her phone again, like the 911 operator would somehow rescue her dignity from collapsing. That was when the police car pulled into the lot. But this time, no sirens, no urgency, just a slow, steady arrival. Officer Barnes stepped out, the same one from our first encounter, and gave me a nod. Then he walked toward Gladys. "Ma'am," he said with the patience of a kindergarten teacher, "we got a call again. This is all perfectly legal. I've reviewed the paperwork myself. These events are even supported by the Parks Department. You need to stop calling emergency services over personal disputes." Gladys puffed out her chest. "You're on his side. I'm on the side of not wasting public resources," he replied. "And this is the last warning. If you make another false emergency report, we'll have to escalate this." Her mouth flapped open, but no sound came out. Her power was slipping. The crowd was no longer interested in her tantrum. Kids went back to flying mini drones through hoops. The teens started recording again, whispering excitedly that the Gladys from the viral drone video had just shown up in person. She stormed off moments later, defeated, her SUV wheels spinning gravel as she sped away. Later that day, after the crowd thinned out and we packed up the gear, I sat with a few friends under the shade of an oak tree and review the day's footage. The aerial shots were beautiful, but the highlight, Gladys Meltdown Part 2, captured in crisp 4K with multiple angles thanks to other drone pilots and someone's phone camera. We all laughed watching it back. This one was going to be gold. But the fallout from the event didn't stop at laughs. Apparently, Gladys Hoa Board had also caught wind of her latest public performance. One of the members, a retired judge who'd been on the fence about her, finally decided enough was enough. He called for a full review of Gladys' history on the board, her decisions, her conduct, and especially her use of Hoa authority outside its jurisdiction. An audit followed, and what it uncovered was worse than anyone expected. Gladys had been issuing fines for infractions that didn't exist, collecting payments through a side account not officially linked to the Hoa Treasury. Some of that money had been redirected toward community safety initiatives, which turned out to include a new patio set for her backyard and a $400 drone jammer listed as communication signal monitor. That was the smoking gun. The board removed her unanimously, not just suspended, permanently banned from holding any position in the Hoa. A formal notice was sent to every household, and Gladys's face, once printed in every Hoa newsletter, was now unofficially associated with disgrace. She was livid. She appealed, screamed about conspiracies, accused everyone of collusion. But the evidence was too strong and the neighbors too tired of her antics. 1 week later, a big white sign appeared in front of her house, for sale by owner. She didn't have the decency to go quietly. Rumors swirled about a lawsuit in the works, a desperate attempt to sue the Hoa itself, and even a letter to a local news station begging them to expose the drone menace. Taking over Ridgeview, no one cared. As for me, my subscriber count had tripled. I was now being invited to speak at hobbyist conferences, and a local high school asked me to teach a workshop. It was surreal. I had started flying drones to capture nature landscapes and the occasional quiet sunset. I never imagined one would lead to a courtroom drama with Hoa politics and federal agents, let alone give me a platform to educate others. In the weeks that followed, Ridgeview began to change. Without Gladys' constant surveillance and micromanagement, neighbors started to loosen up. People planted wildflowers instead of strict hedges. Kids rode scooters without getting glared at. A guy even flew a kite on a weekday, which probably would have triggered a written warning before. The atmosphere was lighter, more forgiving. It wasn't perfect, but it felt more like a community and less like a prison with gardening privileges. One afternoon, Terry, the quiet Hoa board member who had exposed Gladys' audio recordings, came by my house with a six-pack and a grin. He thanked me for everything, then confessed that he'd started his own YouTube channel, Neighborhood Nonsense. The first video, a spoof reenactment of Gladys' drone rant starring sock puppets. We both laughed so hard we nearly dropped our drinks. That kind of laughter, the kind that comes after long tension, is a different kind of medicine. Life eventually settled back into something close to normal. I went back to filming nature footage, birds along the creek, time-lapse sunsets over the hills. But I never forgot what happened or how quickly misinformation and entitlement could escalate. I kept my licenses up to date, my flight logs meticulous, and my camera rolling just in case. Sometimes, when I fly over the park, I look down at the picnic tables, the trails, the little open space where it all began. It's peaceful now. Families walk without worry. No one screams about drones. And somewhere out there, I imagine Gladys trying to rebuild her empire of rules in a new neighborhood, unaware that she's already a legend on the internet. As the drone hovers above the trees, wind brushing against its rotors, I take a moment to breathe. I didn't just win a fight. I proved something. That facts matter. That calm persistence can stand up to loud ignorance. And that sometimes the best view of justice is from 30 feet above the ground.